So good morning, everyone. Today we start in not the usual time zone for Scylla. So we start within the Europe time zone. I'm now currently in our Warsaw office. So everybody who is in this time zone, welcome to the webinar. With us, we have Laith Alkhouri, who is a very well-known intelligence advisor and also specialist in the cyber terrorism and also like how to counter it. Like he's advising many intelligence agencies. With you as well today is myself. I'm the CEO and the founder of Scylla. I guess everybody already heard about us. And then we have our CTO, Ashot Harutyunyan, who will be helping us with the demos and then trying how the technology can solve the problems that Laith is going to explain more during this webinar. So Laith, thanks for joining us today. I guess you are doing a very important job. Not a surprise that Scylla is working with a lot of intelligence agencies through consultants like Laith. So we help a lot. We have people on the board from FBI. One of our board of advisors is managing a company called Risk Workers from Germany, and he's helping the German government with intelligence related tasks using Scylla technology. And Laith, who is helping us essentially across the globe with all those tasks, especially in the Middle East and also in Asia Pacific. So Anastasia, next slide. Good, Laith. So I guess you can take over here and tell us essentially on the important job that Scylla and your company are doing in this field.
Thank you so much, Albert, and thank you to the entire Scylla team for inviting me to join this webinar and discuss some of the things that are related to the field of counterterrorism, a field I've been in for over 16 years, and I'm humbled to be part of this webinar. I guess at the outset, I think when a lot of people think of counterterrorism in the old days, they think of actual combat operations where you launch attacks, you kill terrorists in some field. But of course, the counterterrorism field is huge today, and it has many different subfields. We can talk about cyber operations or countering the use of the internet by terrorist groups and their supporters. We can talk about field operations like we discussed, combat counterintelligence on the grounds. We can talk about, of course, anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist financing field, which is a huge field in and of itself. And of course, there are so many people who are in the research and analysis field, and there are so many other fields. But the idea here is that counterterrorism is huge, and every tool in the toolbox that we can use to counter the work of terrorist groups and their supporters and countering the expansion of their agenda is really critical. And I guess it is no mystery that the main goal of terrorist groups is to attack civilians, innocent lives. We can talk about that. The idea has they have a political message. They are not associated or they are not acting on behalf of a nation state. They're a non-state actor. But really, from a physical security perspective, we want to protect the lives of innocent people. And so, terrorists might use obfuscation, try to hide themselves, hide their identity, hide their movement. They're conducting operations to attack. They are conducting financing to finance, fundraising to finance those attacks. And of course, propagating their messages and content to radicalize and recruit. So on the CT side, in the counterterrorism field, the ultimate goal is to protect those innocent lives. There are preventative measures, there are combative measures or offensive measures, there are investigative measures that we can solve cases from, but also help us in the future. And of course, there's the proactive or intelligence gathering side of things. But if we really summarize what CT's goal is, it is really preventative. We want to prevent a terrorist attack. We want to prevent the advancement of terrorist agendas. And so when we look at the proactive or intelligence gathering, we look at the investigative, we look at the combative, all of it, especially the combative could be preemptive, all of it really pours into the bucket of preventative, and that is the main goal. And I believe Scylla is a critical tool in this toolbox that can help in preventing potential attacks and preventing potential terrorists from advancing. So if we go to the next slide, I look at Scylla's incredible technology as both preventative and investigative, especially on the forensic side. And I think a lot of people know that, yes, you want to prevent an attack from happening, but in any case, something does unfortunately take place. We want to investigate it with speed and efficiency to not only bring this case to court, but also potentially find other associates or linkages with other potential criminal suspects, terrorists. And I should mention that while we are talking about terrorism today, we should also keep in mind that it's physical security threats in general. We can talk about human trafficking. We can talk about drug and arms smuggling. We can talk about a variety of gang-related activities, school shootings, and of course, even crimes against humanity and war crimes from conflict zones. So going on the next slide, I have a few use cases where I think Scylla, the technology, would be immensely helpful in advancing the work of security teams. And here I want to talk a little bit about the Paris attacks of November 2015. We know that the attackers attacked multiple places in Paris. Of course, the attacks were masterminded by Belgian-born or Belgian national Abdelhamid Abaoud, who had traveled from Europe and to Syria and joined ISIS ranks there on the ground, trained with them, committed horrific acts on the grounds there, and actually traveled back to Europe twice before conducting and gathering the resources to conduct these attacks in Paris and also in Belgium. And what's really interesting is that Abdelhamid Abaoud had an international arrest warrant by Interpol, a red notice, for his arrest prior to the Paris attack. So identity was well known. So if we backtrack a little bit, let's talk about blacklisted persons or even individuals with red notices, arrest warrants, or what I like to call persons of interest, POIs, persons of interest that law enforcement wants to talk to, law enforcement wants to interrogate, while law enforcement these individuals might or might not have been involved in cases, but finding them is absolutely critical. And many of them, especially those who have committed crimes, will use forged documents, passports, identification cards. And those are, unfortunately, are easily obtainable, whether you can order them with a couple $100 from the dark web, from a marketplace, or whether you're using a specialized software. And there are a number of software that enable them to forge identifications or identification documents. And so let's say this individual possessed these documents, and they can try to escape or enter sensitive locations, borders, airports, mission sites, sensitive locations, embassies, consulates, etc. With facial recognition technology that's already embedded in CCTV cameras in those sensitive locations. With that type of arrest warrant, kind of a targeted surveillance, trying to find that individual, or let's call it a person search. The ability to have the automatic scanning of thousands and thousands and thousands of people to find that needle in a haystack is absolutely incredibly paramount. That speed and efficiency to find that individual not only would make the lives of investigators and law enforcement officers much easier, but also it could potentially save lives, which is really incredible. And that's what we really need. So the facial recognition technology automatically scans those persons of interest against existing databases, databases that law enforcement agencies have, like blacklists and wanted or most wanted lists, etc. that have been also shared from an intelligence sharing perspective. If the FBI is looking for somebody, they'll put a notice for Border Patrol and for with the TSA at airports, etc., to find that individual before they can advance. So I talked a little bit about the Paris attacks being a case in point wherein this individual or individuals whose identity was known to law enforcement, and it would have been shared across multiple countries because it is by the Interpol as well as the French authorities, that had we had something where we would have recognized him passing through Greece and using forged documents, that maybe this sort of could have been prevented. But we don't want to dwell on what already happened. But the idea is to take this case in point and look at the absolutely amazing applicability of this technology and what it could do down the line. And we all know that terrorist groups have today decentralized around the world. They have many different networks and cells and branches operating in various countries. And intelligence sharing already exists between various governments and law enforcement agencies, especially in allied countries. So it would be absolutely paramount to have this technology. It would immensely be helpful. So we don't want those individuals to bypass the law enforcement scrutiny, and we want to be able to identify them through the traffic flow and the person search. I'll talk about another use case. I think most people by now are aware of what happened on September 11th, 2012 in Benghazi, Libya, where an armed mob and a number of terrorists gathered and attacked the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, which unfortunately killed U.S. ambassador in Libya and at least 3 other Americans. And this event unfolded almost in real time across the entire world. So keep that scenario on the back burner for a second. Let's say a crowd is gathering outside a mission site, outside a consulate, outside an embassy. The crowd is gathering, the crowd is angry on the backdrop of some political tensions. And, without naming any specific embassy today, we've seen this unfold for the past 5 years in front of many, many of them. And while I'm a proponent for the right to protest and the right to demonstrate, this is your #1 right for free speech. But once this gets violent and innocent lives are at risk, the ability to first identify arms, identify guns, this object recognition technology is absolutely crucial to identify individuals who might be carrying a gun, because that puts innocent lives at risk immediately. Also, individuals who might be on most wanted list, who might be blacklisted, individuals who are there's a warrant for their arrest. Those individuals might also be, agent provocateur, individuals who want to provoke others and to advance this protest to be more violent. So the ability to conduct that simultaneously can be, again, immensely helpful from a speed and efficiency, and conducting law enforcement practices and measures in a very efficient way. Think of as I mentioned, the gun detection. What could happen once immediately a gun is detected? Law enforcement and other enforcement is deployed. Action is taken very, very quickly. From a facial recognition perspective, databases of wanted individuals, individuals who are under warrant for arrest, zooming in on those specific individuals, knowing that they have existed in that location, puts a static timestamp on where they existed at what time. And of course, being able to identify them and share that intelligence with other law enforcement, potentially leading to their arrest. And of course, running that information, which is a tool that's used by many different law enforcement and intelligence agencies across the globe, is the ability to have data agnostic investigative tools that enable individuals to input internal and external data and conduct that kind of analysis. So having identified that individual at a specific location with a specific time and running that through internal data of wanted individuals, police reports, intelligence sharing reports, and so on and so forth, being able to extract more information on that individual, perhaps an alias, perhaps other forged documents, perhaps travel routes that they've taken, and potentially identify associates of that individual who also might be involved in criminal activity is absolutely important. So now bring the case that we put on the back burner for a second. What happened on September 11, 2012, when the violent mob ultimately attacked the embassy and killed innocent Americans, including U.S. ambassador, which is a diplomatic catastrophe for most countries. It took the United States nearly 2 years to finally capture Ahmed Abu Khatala, who is believed to be the mastermind and ringleader of the mob that launched that attack. And of course, associated with Ansar al-Sharia in Libya, a designated terrorist group. It took the US almost 2 years to finally capture him. And I think most people know that these types of field operations not only take endless weeks and months to conduct, but also the utility or the utilization of various technologies, satellite images, the utilization or employment of human confidential informants and sources on the grounds, and the ability to talk to local, state, and federal law enforcement in various countries and missions there. So it's a massive, super expensive effort to launch such operations and measures to arrest those individuals. So having, again, this tool in the toolbox that enables law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies to zoom in on those very specific individuals, whether they're carrying arms, whether they have their faces recognized, and having to conduct that in a very speedy manner is absolutely crucial in our field.
Quick question, Laith. So thanks for this. This is super insightful. In my previous background before Scylla, I was doing security consulting as well. Mostly in the Latin American market, like in Mexico. And then let's maybe from your experience. So we talk about the state intelligence, we talk about airports, law enforcement, right? Which is, again, it's an important work, but we want to cover also corporate security departments, because everybody knows that, let's say, companies like Aramco or Apple, they are essentially countries by themselves, right? The market valuation is more than $1 trillion. They have their corporate security departments. Most of the former FBI guys or Ministry of Intelligence from Saudi Arabia are working in Aramco, and those companies headquartered in basically safe states. They have also operations offshore, and there are countries right in African region, in Asia Pacific, even in the North African region, which basically the state or state-sponsored bad actors are trying to bully the corporates into complying to specific rules, complying to specific tax systems, etc. So what about let's say corporate security department? Let's assume you are the head of security of a big corporate in Dubai, and now you have an assignment to do in Libya, let's say construction work or protecting oil and gas facility, etc. How can you use this basically technology, or what would be the steps to enroll bad actors? Because from my previous career, I saw, for example, people pretending that they are part of NGOs or activists, right? They are coming, doing photos of the facilities, secure infrastructures, and then they appear during the protests and they try to destroy facility, enter the facility, steal something like corporate spying, etc. Right? Do you think that this technology basically is mostly useful for governments, or the corporate securities can also make sense? And then what's the typical workflow of, let's say, if you were the head of security, let's say of Apple, what would you do?
No, this is a really fantastic question, and actually it kind of falls into three different areas. First, from a physical security perspective, protecting structure is absolutely crucial, and we can talk about an actual use case back from 2013, the big terrorist attack on the In Amenas gas and oil facility in Algeria, which led to the death of a number of people, including Europeans and Americans, actually, and it was conducted by a terrorist group affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and some of those individuals actually were well known to law enforcement. And given that this gas facility in Amenas region was actually European facility, providing that kind of tool for the security team would absolutely be crucial. So that would be a priority on the list for gas and oil facilities, because we also have precedent of this actually taking place, and it has not taken place only one time. Gas and oil facilities today continue to be one of the main targets of physical threat groups. The second thing which you mentioned is the insider threat aspect, and I believe insider threat on the cyber and the physical side is a huge problem. On the cyber side, continues today to be a huge problem, because we have disgruntled employees who are part of a corporation, and they end up infiltrating their systems, stealing that data, leaking that data, or selling it, or just putting it out in the wild to be exploited. And of course, insider threat continues to be as well physical. A number of incidents have happened in the past where a disgruntled employee had ended up launching an actual attack on their workplace, and providing that tool to be able to detect whether it's an object detection, like a gun when the person enters the facility, or sharing those images from an investigative perspective and sharing them with law enforcement to conduct due diligence on those individuals also would be absolutely important. And I guess the third part is, I think what you mentioned is the economic espionage aspect, where individuals, let's take a case in point here, where individuals building LinkedIn profiles today and try to infiltrate the lives of employees of certain corporations, whether to steal proprietary information or to be able to recruit them to an adversarial state agency to use them in counterintelligence. And that's already taking place today by a number of countries. And so I think these are all critical use cases that I think Scylla would absolutely help for any corporate structure. And this is not only oil and gas facilities like we talked about, but think of real estate agencies, think of critical infrastructure, bridges and tunnels and other physical structure that's out there. And of course, think of the technology companies today. We can talk about Twitter, Facebook, and other giant social media companies that have been in the crosshair of physical threat actors who launched threats against them, who wanted to attack their physical structures. And I can remember a few cases from back in 2015 and 2016, when individuals associated with ISIS even threatened Twitter because Twitter was suspending their accounts online. So absolutely, I hope this answers your question.
No, absolutely. And also I'm a big fan, essentially of your research, and I'm following you in LinkedIn and on your basically live presence, besides the work that we do with the intelligence community together. Take this Libya case, I know you're an expert there. I've been reading that essentially people responsible for the attack on the embassy, they have been noticed basically in the same cars, also previously a couple of days ago, just scouting the area, making photos. So I believe by utilizing a mix of facial recognition / license plate recognition and also vehicle classification, dwell time, staying, like when the vehicle stays in one area where it shouldn't stay longer than enough, identifying anomalies, right? This also essentially gives both the government facilities, but also corporate facilities, like a lot of information that they can essentially prevent a threat or at least be more ready, right? Like if you know that essentially people are just loitering around, the same car passes by, staying for a longer time, etc. This gives you a lot of information on what's going to potentially happen. And this technology is majorly underutilized now, like by most of the government facilities. Like, to be honest, like Scylla has more private customers because and it's funny enough because the heads of private security are former intelligence or FBI guys, like across the globe, right? And being part of private companies, they are more open to utilize this rather than governments, because governments have this kind of a stigma that they shouldn't use it. But especially with, I would say, valuable target protection like embassies or foreign consulates, or essentially this is a super useful technology.
Super useful.
Yeah.
No, I 100%. I 100% agree with you, and I would add that I would stress exactly what you mentioned about individuals who are loitering around, who have been conducting reconnaissance and surveillance on very specific targets, and we know this has happened factually multiple times. But also individuals who might have conducted an attack and returning to the crime scene as well, where the ability of identifying those individuals while they have been loitering around, and then post-incident scanning of identifying those individuals after returning to the crime scene is absolutely crucial. And we can talk about things like school shootings that have happened as well, but also think of even issues that are costing us lives, but not from a direct attack, like fentanyl and other drug cartels, smuggling those poisons across the border. And we know that's happening through ships and boats, but also across the border with mules. Those individuals who have been noticed in the past to have successfully crossed and have not been able to identify them when they have crossed again, carrying a massive amount of drugs in their stomach. All of that is absolutely important. So I 100% agree with you. We have a ton, maybe countless use cases where Scylla would be immensely helpful from a speed and efficiency. But again, I can't stress enough that saving lives is #1 priority.
No, exactly. I can bring like 2 use cases and then I promise I shut up. It's just because I love
much please.
What you do.
This
and
is
also
great.
have some experience with it. Like one of the use cases we identified is essentially there was a high value target energy substation, and near that substation, we noticed a car loitering around for almost a week. So we noticed the license plates, we saw that there's like always 2 people going out, etc. And in a specific zone. The third time we noticed it, like we saw that there is also flying object, like UAV. So most probably they were conducting either aerial surveillance or they were trying to essentially hit the substation. So this gave essentially the corporate security officer a lot of clue about that, because when you combine essentially the human activity with some anomalies like staying in one zone, the same license plate approaches like the facility 3 or 4 times in a row in a week, and then you also see that there is an unknown like flying object like next to that vehicle in the same perimeter at the same time, then gives you a lot of clue that these guys are like doing something bad or that they're trying to attack the substation, right? Like another case, which from your example, we actually have a customer, it's a shipping company. So they bring a lot of stuff from Colombia to Antwerpen. And what the aforementioned cartels are doing, essentially those shipping companies are transferring coal, and the guys which are basically transferring drugs, they take the trash bags, the black plastic bags, and put it in a coal at night. So it's not visible. So even humans cannot differentiate it. So one of the like interesting use cases for us was to understand the shape, and if the shape is different from the coal, and understand that it's a plastic bag. So like at least the crew of the ship can pay attention, like that there is something like foreign, like we call it foreign object detection. And then we found the case that was actually drugs. And the bad thing for the shipping companies is that they get fined a lot, like in worst case, they get jailed for transferring drugs like that, especially like it's I mean, those people are smart, but they're not that smart. It's like essential groups. It's Colombia, Antwerpen, and then you have major routes, right? So you need to try to understand anomalies there. And it's very interesting if you combine a technology with a brain like yours to try to make sense of that essentially whole chain of events.
Albert, I can't tell you how important what you just mentioned is, because we all know that no agency relies only on one tool. There's a multitude of tools in their employ that they just deploy a variety of them. And the idea is finding those patterns and behaviors and connecting the dots. And I can probably endlessly talk about the ability of combining various data sources, including external and internal, proprietary and commercially available, and various types of data format, images, videos run against what you mentioned, license plates, events happening. Combining all of that and conducting that investigation is being done today, but I don't think that it's being done as efficiently as it should. Because much of this data exists in silos. And so the ability to find those patterns, the behaviors, and add that variable to the investigative process can really solve a lot of cases. And I think from solving case perspective, I think our next slide will actually talk about that, where we are able to conduct the forensic investigation part. Thank you. Great. So this is one of my favorite things to discuss, the investigative part, because while we want to be as proactive and preventative as possible, there are countless number of cases that have been unsolved and countless number of cases that are taking place in real time. And investigators have a huge responsibility to sift through the evidence, to collect the evidence, to sift through it, to find the clues, and finally, potentially zoom in on specific suspects. And this process can take, yes, weeks and months, but some of it, there is evidence from years back, and these are cold cases sitting in a storage. So let me talk a little bit about what I have done, some of the stuff I have done, and then some of the stuff that exists today with law enforcement and why this is important for both the public and the private sector. Law enforcement databases are in the petabytes. I mean, they are massive, and they collect a lot of information related to a variety of use cases, and they're indexed and archived per those use cases. And there is a case management to be able to look at those cases, look at the evidence, review the evidence, and manage the evidence, ultimately until you have a full case with the right evidence to take to court. So much of this data can be suspect images from surveillance tape or collected at incidents. It could be IDs and passport scans and so on and so forth. A lot of images. And let's talk about video archive specifically. Video archive can be CCTV footage, can be a variety of other footage, multimedia that has been gathered and provided to law enforcement agencies and investigators and even civilian investigators. And finally, we have a case, let's say, and I've worked on dozens of those cases, a terrorism suspect. Once they have identified that individual as a suspect, maybe him and her and their associates, their devices are collected, their computers, their phones, et cetera, and the ability to conduct forensic evidence on that device. What they've done with that device essentially can be a treasure trove of intelligence that could be used against them in the court of law, but also solve current cases and potentially lead to solving or preventing future cases or future attacks. And so a lot of that evidence are just simply images and videos, and a lot of that evidence are collected by the suspect themselves on their device, saved in their photo file. But also a lot of it is their social media accounts that they visited, and they have associates on those social media accounts. The ability to run from a forensic perspective all of those images against the law enforcement databases and the video archives that have been built of suspects and identify those individuals very quickly, or at least conduct that investigation in a speedy manner, is absolutely important. One, it just saves time to move on to more important stuff. Two, it saves resources. Instead of taking many investigators weeks, months, and years to conduct this effort, you're able to just let the machine do it on your behalf and zoom in with 100% accuracy on those individuals. So from a forensic perspective, we are able to zoom in on those individuals, potentially arrest them, identify their associates, but also those cold cases of those files that have been collected throughout time. And I'm not talking just about law enforcement. I'm talking about NGOs that have collected and the media that has collected evidence from conflict zones. I know we have Ukraine happening today. Previously we can talk about Syria, but there are really conflicts all around the world where people have put their lives on the front lines to collect this absolutely critical footage from those conflict zones. And with the faces of perpetrators, criminals, terrorists, even those who conducted crimes against humanity are collected and be able to not only identify them, but down the line use that in the court of law, whether international tribunals or of course in state and local courts, becomes absolutely critical. Ultimately, even grainy videos from 10, 15 years ago that have been collected on certain crimes or individuals have been lurking in certain environments where a crime has been committed now could potentially be solved because of this technology. And I think, this gets me very excited because I have huge passion about solving old crimes as much as new ones, because it brings peace of mind, not only to investigators, but of course, the victims of the victim families. And one other topic from a physical security perspective, and I know we talked about all of these cases, but even when we talk about child sexual abuse material, that is lurking in the darkest corners of the internet, and individuals who might be able to identify those kids and rescue them or identify where they were last seen or who's seen them, that becomes really important and brings a lot of emotions for people in our field, because that is one of the use cases that are absolutely important. Any questions on this so far? Because I know that there's a lot, but I promise this is going to be my last use case. And I know there are a ton of use cases. But I think from a person search and identifier perspective, sifting through, and I talked about it in the beginning, sifting through just thousands and thousands and thousands of people every day who are traveling, and incidents happen all the time, crimes happen all the time, individuals flee the crime scene all the time, and many of them have been identified, but nowhere to be found. So the ability to share that information, and I should say that video footage and video evidence is absolutely paramount. It is the cache of all evidence. It is the most important evidence in any court of law. The ability to have that identifier on that individual, a picture and a gender, other identifier details, carrying a bag, not carrying a bag, what they're wearing, etc. That the more information that becomes available, the better. And all of that information immediately goes to of course, federal authorities and other law enforcement. Many of them are put on a most wanted list and other wanted lists. Borders and Customs and TSA, many of them have the blacklists and the intelligence sharing that takes place between the variety of federal law enforcements, including ATF and others. And of course, many times these images go out to the public. An alert notice or to the media that's constantly reporting on the accident and talking about the suspect and what other details they can know from their own investigation on those suspects. All of that information is sitting in those databases and people are trying to identify them. How amazing is having that ability to identify that individual by artificial intelligence using those identifiers while this individual is trying to flee on a plane, walking through the airport, and be able to zoom in on them by the various CCTV cameras there, identify them, arrest them, bring them to justice before they're able to board a plane and get away. Or individuals who might, and this happens all the time, who might have been kidnapped and are trying to be smuggled or taken overseas. A family member will report them as missing. That individual is finally identified with their kidnapper trying to smuggle them across overseas and to other regions. So I know when we say that this happens all the time, it's not because we work in this field. It's, you can easily go to any episode of crime documentary or forensic files or other types of documentary series and shows, and you'll hear about all of the variety of those cases that have already taken place where individuals have been they fled the crime scene, never been able to identify it until many years later, or individuals who were kidnapped and unfortunately many of them never found or found dead, and others who were fortunate to be rescued. So this can be in many ways individuals who might be fallen a victim for romance scams, for example, lured in by those individuals. This could be individuals who are smuggling drugs and mules, but also it could be, human trafficking, and it could be, unfortunately, also terrorists who are trying to go from one site of an attack to another site. So I hope that with all of the use cases that we discussed today, our audience is able to get a better glimpse of what Scylla is able to help with, and just in general, think of it as both the preventative side and the investigative side. So I have just last slide, just the key takeaways from what I talked about, and I think everybody would agree with me that this AI video intelligence is just a key ingredient in the intelligence architecture. Like I mentioned, there are so many different tools in the intelligence design, and each tool has a role, and having video intelligence with artificial intelligence capacity becomes an integral part. So we talked about speed and efficiency, which is really important. So it's enabling various security teams to prevent potential attacks, which is what we really want to achieve at the outset, the prevention part. Of course, it enhances the investigative process, like we talked about from a forensics perspective. And of course, this is a no-brainer that it's a force multiplier for all physical security teams, not only law enforcement and government, but of course, what you, Albert, and I talked about earlier, physical structure, the oil and gas facilities, manufacturing facilities, technology companies, missions consulates, and embassies around the world. And I think,
perfect.
And airports, the aviation industry is just so critical. So I can't stress enough how great of a force multiplier it is for a variety of physical security teams, and of course the intelligence sharing process. So thank you again for having me on to discuss some of the things I'm passionate about, and thank you for developing such an incredible technology that I think is a no-brainer to implement as part of the intelligence structure.
No, thanks for being with us, Laith. So we believe your experience is incredible, right? Like you're already helping us within the intelligence community, and then why we also secured quite large contracts with you already. So thanks for everything you do, both for the humanity, but also helping businesses like Scylla, right? So maybe we can also show a quick demo. Thank you. Of the technology as we have more than 20 AI features available with a full command and control, but we could essentially touch upon a couple of topics which we described today, including person search, traffic flow analysis, and also having people on a watch list with the auto enrollment, where you don't need to create the database of people on a watch list manually, but you can just continue scanning crowds of people and then marking them as targets, VIP visitors, like people on a watch list, etc. So Ash, maybe you can take it from here.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll be quick with the demo. This is our enterprise dashboard on the screen. First thing first, when you install the Scylla, you need to connect the cameras. Cameras are usually connected per sites. If you have multiple sites, you can list all the sites here, located in different geographic locations. And every site can contain its own cameras. And then once the cameras are already connected, you can then enable various amount of different detections. We divide detections into two parts. One is object detection and the other is anomaly detection, anomaly behavior detection. Let's take a look at the face recognition. We spoke about that a lot during the webinar. For each module, for example, face recognition, there will be a enterprise dashboard, just like you see on the screen. In the first page, you can organize your cameras per layout, see the live view, create different views per location, per camera groups. And then once the cameras are set up, you are going to deploy the cameras. And here's the trick. If you have 100 cameras, it is not necessary to deploy all of them. You can deploy, for example, 3 cameras, just like I did here. And then those cameras will start capturing faces. And if you navigate to the database, for example, you'll see that software is capturing everybody entering the rooms, showing up on the cameras, and it will build up a database over time. So this database is going to be growing and growing. And on top of this database, you can then go ahead and set up your watch list. And then you can also set up lots of different rules. Each person is assigned a unique ID. And then once you identify them, you can then edit the information and provide lots of useful information. First name, last name, email address, and these two are very important. For example, you can label the person, and then you can also specify the case number. In case of criminals, you can basically type the case number here and then put them in a watch list. And once they come back, you will see the label of that person and also the case number, so you can quickly identify the case that made you to add this person to the watch list. And then you can also search a person by a picture. You can search a person by username, user ID, first name, last name, email, case number, label, and so on. And then you can also group a person per user ID. It will show all the detections of that particular person over time, grouped by the cameras and then by the user ID. You can also group by the camera here. It will show all the cameras and detections per that camera. And then the searching functionality, of course, you can search within the alarms and within the history. So every time there is a person who is captured by the camera, by the system, it will match to the existing database. And once it is found, it will be assigned the same person ID. So this person ID is one unique identifier for you to track the face across different pages. Next module is traffic flow analysis. We spoke about this also in terms of forensic search capabilities. Again, the same look and feel of the dashboard, but there's a different functionality. If you come to the search, you'll be able to create a new case. Case means that you have a searching inquiry and you have, for example, attributes of a person which you want
wait
to
a
use
second, Ash, because we had a question on this. Sorry for interrupting. I know I have a terrible character of doing this. So we had a question like, can you find people in camouflage? So yes, using this functionality, and we already have cases for the border control. You can have this running on long-range cameras, both optical and thermal stream, and then you can set up a rule, which Ashot is going to explain later. Like you can create a case and say, look, I want to search for a guy, male, 35 to 50 years old, wearing long sleeve green clothing, which looks like a uniform, has a backpack backpack cover, and also crossing specific line, cross line. And also this system that Ashot is going to show you also has cross lines, which is showing you the direction. So in this case, you can also implement potential friend or foe, right? Like I'm quoting myself because that's not a real friend or foe, but like if the person is coming from one direction or a group of people or vehicles, you can essentially classify them. Yeah, sorry, Ash, I'm shutting up again.
No issues. So in the case list, I prepared some cases for the demo. For example, we are searching for a male with a backpack in this case. First criteria is the date and time, and then you can select all of your cameras or maybe one camera. This based on the prior information, and then you can specify the tolerance, whether it's low, high, or normal. Usually I use high to catch the best possible search results. And then I specify man, woman, or a child. And then 2 age groups we support as of now. And you can specify the attributes upper and lower with the colors. In this case, I was searching only for a person with backpack on this particular camera. In another case, I have.
And you can search this like across like thousands of cameras. It's going to basically bring it in one single view and show you all the people that essentially were found by the search engine. And then you can click it, and then we have a feature which basically is called re-identification. So you will continue, the system automatically will continue searching for that person, because every person that we search using attribute search gets a unique ID. You click on the unique ID, and then it spans searching like in 3,000 cameras, let's say in your airport. And then it will show you all instances where we detected that person, and you can then continue adding rules to it. Sorry, Ash, go ahead.
In this example, I'm looking for a female from 18 to 60 age group. Upper color is black and the lower color is blue. So as you can see from this camera view, everything else is wiped, and only women with the upper black and lower blue are visible. And on the right side, as you can see, I have many detections here. Each line here means there is a unique detection. If I click on it, the video will jump on that second, and it will show the object that was detected. And also, this can be a limited search. I have a limit 10, but if there are many other results, I can click load more, and it will bring me more results based on the search criteria. In the other case, I was searching a woman with the upper green and lower black. And as you can see, there is a one finding with that criteria. And as I said, you can specify multiple cameras here, select multiple, and there will be different tabs here showing you detections per camera. So in this case, there is a male with the black upper and lower is not mentioned. And based on this data, you can basically shorten the search time. So if you have many hours of video, you can, based on prior information, you can shorten the view time of the video to be able to get the result back from the system.
And with this technology, you can also create custom rules. Like you can go as crazy as say, look, I want to search for an SUV, and the driver always was wearing a black shirt. The driver was on a watch list. And by the way, I want to identify if this SUV was crossing a specific perimeter, like staying longer than it should in a secure, next to the secure perimeter, maybe stalking like on an embassy employees, etc. Yeah. So like many rules can be customized. I'm sorry, Laith, go ahead.
No, this is great. And I think, Albert, one thing that you mentioned is really key, which is the ability to have a range of cameras, multiple cameras from all angles across let's say an entire airport, across a military base, or some of them can be as big as cities, like you mentioned before. And the ability to, yes, identify them, but also position their existence or their presence at that time, at that location, throughout their entire pattern of life, from the moment they enter to the moment they they exit, and using all of those timelines, where they stop first, where they stop second, where they stop third, and establishing that timeline is absolutely important when it comes to investigative cases.
Thank you, Laith. Cool. So I think we are done with the demo. Laith, anything you would like to add, or maybe summarize? Like, if we have questions, you're on mute.
Unmute, yeah. I think there was a question. I'm not sure if it's been answered. Somebody had asked a question about what's the accuracy. Well, I think you guys are better positioned to talk about that aspect. But from my side, I think we can talk about eyewitness accounts all the time. Eyewitness accounts are important in any of those use cases. So imagine expanding the eyewitness accounts into so many other places, but with a lot better accuracy than my own eyes. The ability to have identify an individual suspect against an actual picture of that suspect is a lot better than my own eyewitness accounts and many others. But really, it's a force multiplier for eyewitness accounts that are always reporting on individual was here, individual was there. This just gives the accuracy, efficiency, and multiplies the eyes zooming in on that specific individual.
Okay, thanks, Laith. That makes sense. I think we have another question. How do you receive alerts from Scylla? Yeah, we have a full integration with Hanwha Wave. Actually, Christian, we are strategic partners with Hanwha. IC West this year in Vegas will be co-exhibiting together with Hanwha. So they have a big booth, and we'll be one part of their booth. So we have essentially a couple of strategic relationships. One of them is Hanwha, another one is Konica Group overall, and then Mobotics. So anything related to Wave, we have a full integration with Network Optics and Wave, which is an OEM of Network Optics. It's a native SDK integration. Any other questions, guys, like that we could help you with, or? Cool. So I think let's maybe summarize here, Laith. So would be good if you leave your contact information for the people, because we have many representatives from both corporate and also government intelligence communities. So again, Laith and his team are doing an incredible work, both helping communities, governments, corporates, but also businesses like Scylla to essentially enable this technology for the end customer. I think by using the help of Laith and his company, you'll be able to promote your services within the companies that you are working with, bringing it more, not just CCTV, but also intelligence space. And then obviously with the help of Laith and Scylla team, and Anastasia will write down our contact details, we will be able to achieve the KPIs that currently integrators or security companies cannot achieve, because a lot of work is now a mix of cybersecurity, physical security, and also intelligence, which should be done with the help of command and control systems like Scylla, but also with the help of people as Laith.
Yeah, thank you, Albert. This is I appreciate it. I feel humbled to be part of this discussion, and of course, anybody who wants to know more about Scylla here in the region, in EMEA region, in the Middle East, and of course in Asia Pacific, I'm more than happy to help. Intelonics.com is my website, or info@intelonics.com. You can easily reach us. We can set times to discuss and demo Scylla to the teams, but also for all types of matters related to intelligence, whether from a technology or a service perspective. Really more than happy to help. And thank you to the Scylla team again for having me on. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to advancing our partnership.
Thanks for joining us, Laith. My pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining us, and then listening to myself. I hope not much. So Laith was the most experienced guy here in the intelligence space.
Very kind.
Ashot, thanks for the demo. So yeah, looking forward to seeing you next time, guys. Thanks a lot. I hope the webinar was useful, and I would just say have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thank you.